SITREP World Briefing for July 24, 2026. Ukraine launched a drone attack early Friday that triggered a major fire at warehouses used by Russian e-commerce giant Wildberries near St. Petersburg, Russia. Regional officials said at least 3 people were wounded, while video from the scene showed heavy flames and thick smoke rising over the warehouse complex. The strike also temporarily disrupted flights at Pulkovo Airport. Wildberries is one of Russia's largest online retail companies, and a hit on its warehouse network carries economic as well as symbolic weight. Fulfillment centers are central to the movement of consumer goods across Russia. 6 candidates seeking to succeed United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres presented their platforms in New York on Thursday, turning a normally opaque succession process into a public contest over how to steer the organization through a financial and credibility crisis. The field includes former Senegalese President Macky Sall, who said he would work to restore trust in the UN and make it more responsive, while other contenders also laid out plans for reform before member states begin the political bargaining that will determine who advances. The presentations mattered because the Secretary-General's post sits at the center of UN diplomacy, from war mediation to humanitarian coordination. The selection is ultimately controlled by the 15-member Security Council and then the General Assembly. Guterres is approaching the end of his second term, and the debate in New York is already sharpening around whether the next leader can rebuild confidence among member states, stabilize the institution's finances, and navigate rivalries among major powers while preserving the UN's authority across its agencies and missions. India's government and leaders of the youth-led cockroach protest movement agreed to hold talks in New Delhi. The meeting was set after activist Sonam Wangchuk ended a 26-day hunger strike, a step that followed contact with government ministers. Protesters have kept up sit-ins in the capital, pressing demands tied to accountability, employment, and economic opportunity in one of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's most serious youth-driven political challenges since 2014. Authorities extended a mobile internet shutdown in New Delhi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the protests as demonstrators maintained their presence in the capital, and organizers insisted that negotiations alone would not end the campaign. The combination of street mobilization, internet restrictions, and formal talks has made the capital the focal point of a confrontation between a powerful central government and a fast-moving youth movement with national resonance. The United States on Friday began imposing new tariffs on imports from 60 trading partners under a forced labor enforcement drive, with Singapore facing a 12.5% duty after Washington said it had failed to prohibit imports made with forced labor. The broader U.S. action covers 99% of all goods entering the country from the targeted partners and replaces a temporary 10% measure, turning what had been an interim trade step into a far more sweeping penalty regime tied to supply chain compliance. Singapore's Ministry of Trade and Industry said about 1/3 of the city-state's domestic exports to the United States will be affected by the new tariffs. The move also carries wider significance beyond Singapore, because Washington is using market access to pressure trading partners to tighten import controls, document labor conditions in cross-border production, and align more closely with U.S. enforcement standards on goods suspected of being produced with coercive labor practices. Yemen's Houthi rebels said they attacked 2 Saudi oil tankers in the Red Sea on Thursday, escalating a maritime campaign that has widened the regional economic fallout from the Gulf crisis. The reported strikes, described as the Houthis' first attack on a vessel since they announced a blockade of Saudi-linked shipping, helped drive Brent crude above $100 a barrel for the first time since May, as traders priced in a higher risk to one of the world's most important energy corridors. The attacks added a new shipping threat to a market already rattled by direct confrontation involving the United States, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Tehran-backed regional groups. The Red Sea matters far beyond Yemen because it links the Suez Canal and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and any disruption there can quickly raise tanker insurance costs, alter shipping routes, and tighten crude supply expectations. Washington responded by threatening heavier action against both Iran and the Houthis. For Saudi Arabia, the incident cuts into an effort to protect export routes and reassure buyers. For importers in Europe and Asia, crude above $100 raises the prospect of higher fuel, transport, and industrial costs if attacks on tankers continue or spread to other vessels in the Red Sea. President Donald Trump said the United States will move ahead with a civilian nuclear agreement for Saudi Arabia only if the kingdom recognizes Israel, making Saudi accession to the Abraham Accords a central condition of the proposed pact. The announcement put a strategic energy and security deal at the center of Washington's Middle East diplomacy, linking Saudi plans to develop nuclear power with a broader U.S. effort to reshape regional alignments through formal Saudi-Israeli normalization. The proposed agreement is significant because Saudi Arabia is the Arab world's largest economy, a leading oil exporter, and a long-standing U.S. security partner, while Israel's relations with Riyadh have remained unofficial despite years of quiet contacts. By tying civilian nuclear cooperation to diplomatic recognition, Trump is reviving a bargain that previous administrations also saw as transformational. Saudi Arabia would gain U.S. support for a domestic nuclear program, and Washington would seek a landmark political opening between two of its most important regional partners. The plan has also drawn scrutiny because it appears to relax long-standing U.S. demands that have traditionally shaped American nuclear cooperation in the Middle East. That matters in Washington and Jerusalem alike, where lawmakers and analysts have long argued that any Saudi nuclear arrangement must balance energy development, non-proliferation safeguards, and the strategic consequences of giving a powerful Gulf state new nuclear capabilities. The debate now centers on whether normalization with Israel is sufficient political compensation for the concessions the United States may be prepared to make. French authorities ordered mass evacuations across Gironde in southwestern France after fast-moving wildfires spread through the Cap Ferret Peninsula and nearby forest areas, forcing more than 40,000 people to leave over 2 days. Officials said entire communities in Les Cap Ferret were cleared as flames advanced, while another fire near Le Porge added pressure on emergency services. The scale of the operation reflected both the region's dense summer tourism and the speed of the blaze, which was still not under control on Friday. Firefighters mounted a large response as the Cap Ferret fire engulfed forest land, destroyed dozens of homes, and prompted the evacuation of tourists and residents from one of France's Atlantic coastal areas. Reports said about 700 firefighters were deployed against the blaze, which formed part of a broader wildfire emergency in southwestern France as hot, dry, and windy conditions helped flames spread faster. Cap Ferret sits on a narrow peninsula between the Atlantic Ocean and Arcachon Bay, making road access limited during peak travel season and turning evacuation logistics into a major public safety challenge. Sources and the full written briefing are available at sitrepbrief.com.